Hi, Greg here with Gun News Now. And the big question right now, sweeping across the country, is should flock cameras be banned? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get into that, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and be sure to check out all the stories that we have on gunnewsnow.com regarding this particular issue. Okay. It's been interesting. So, as someone who, and for those that don't know me, I have ran the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance for a really long time, which is now a part of Honor Idaho. But I've been a gun rights activist forever here in the state of Idaho. And you rarely get an opportunity, at least the time that I've been in politics, where both sides seem to agree on something. And this flock camera debate seems to have invigorated both sides, and both sides seem to want to put an end to this mass surveillance system. For those that don't know, flock safety cameras are all over the United States. I think Flock themselves has said they're in over 5,000 communities. And the major concern from gun owners, and I think from just citizens in general, is that it is mass AI based surveillance. The cameras are placed all over your city and they can track your entire movement throughout the city. And there's a number of concerns from gun owners and just in general for citizens, is that number one, the data is not very secure. The data can be accessed by essentially anyone in law enforcement, and there's no warrant required for them getting this information. And I've seen some people say, well, yeah, but you have you have your phone and your phone is everywhere and your phone is always spying on you. And to some extent, that's true. But if a law enforcement agency wants access to my phone, they are supposed to get a warrant. Okay, they have to go through that process because this is still my private property, despite the fact that the cell phone company is probably selling my data to someone. And I think that's where some people brought up the Ring camera systems. Oh, well, just have a Ring camera system. That'll, that's what's the difference there? Well, again, that's still private, okay, owned privately by me. And if the police want my Ring camera footage, they're going to either have to get me to voluntarily give it up, or they're going to have to get a warrant and probable cause that they need the information off of my Ring camera. Where right now the flock safety data is just plug and play. Just plug it in and go. Get all the data you want, no warrants, just mass surveillance. Chinese style. I mean, this is what it reminds me. It reminds me of China. It reminds me, honestly, of a couple of movies like Eagle Eye. If you've never seen Eagle Eye, go watch Eagle Eye. Man, you want to talk about some movies that were ahead of their time. We are headed down that road. And Flock is just one of many companies that should very much concern gun owners. And here's the thing, because law enforcement is coming out in droves right now trying to defend these systems because, hey, it allows all we're doing is tracking license plates, which we know is not true. Well, it's helping us solve kidnapping cases or stolen vehicle cases or whatever. And here's where that particular argument gets dangerous, because there are a subset of probably more people on the conservative side of the aisle that agree with that sentiment. They're like, well, I don't have anything to hide, and so I don't really care about the flock safety camera systems if it's going to help solve some crime. Okay, that's the same type of mentality that gun control advocates have used for decades. Look, if we just ban AR-15s, we don't care if you keep your shotgun or your handgun, your handguns or your revolvers or your muskets. You can keep all that stuff. It's just the assault weapons that we want to ban. And if it saves just one life, that's all that matters. Okay, that's the same mentality. You're willing to trade security and liberty. You're willing to trade your liberties for security, because it doesn't hurt you. It doesn't matter to you. The problem is that's all based off of definitions. Number one, Benjamin Franklin said, if you're willing to do that, then you really don't deserve the liberty or the security, this false sense of security that you're going to get. Okay. But setting that aside, I don't understand why conservatives continue. And I think there's less conservatives that are jumping on board the flock camera thing, but there certainly is a subset of people out there that are going to defend this, because what happens when what is dangerous or wrong or whatever is redefined? What if these cameras had been super prevalent during COVID? How would they have been used to target activists like myself or other people who are out protesting against government lockdowns and your freedoms being stripped away? So you have to keep that in mind. How will this be used against you when you are the problem at some point? And then the other thing you have to remember is, once this stuff is prevalent, and the flock is already prevalent everywhere, okay, even though there's citizens just cutting these things down left and right, or blocking them, or spray painting them or whatever. Once this gets a foothold, there's no turning back. And so, in my opinion, this is it. This is our chance. Okay, there's federal legislation coming from Congressman Self and Congressman Massey. There's states that are now looking at either banning flock completely or severely restricting the data and what is required to use the data and all that kind of stuff. And that's all coming about because the systems are already being abused. It's already happening. We don't need to go, at some point, the government's going to abuse their privilege. No, they're already doing it. And there's been cops across the United States, in Idaho and Oregon and California and Georgia, a bunch of them in Georgia. Like, there's just cops getting arrested or fired or forced into resignation all over the place because they are abusing this system. Okay, they are using flock to spy on people, their spouses, their rivals, their mistresses, or whatever. They're using the flock system because they can sit there, it'll tag the plate, and it'll start following that person, and they can follow them however they want to follow them. Just completely inappropriate. And that's the people we know about, right? We know that there's going to be a lot more people who have been abusing those systems than we are ever going to hear about. And as someone who's ran a news organization, I can tell you with certainty, there is so much stuff that gets swept under the rug that the government doesn't want you to know about. Okay, some police department agency that's got 10 guys that have been abusing the flock system, and they're like, well, we can't fire them all, so let's just pretend it didn't happen, and then institute some policies to try and prevent it from happening again. The government is 100% going to abuse those systems, and citizens should just not, you should not let these things into your community if it can be helped. Gun owners in particular, I think, should be concerned, again, because these systems can track you throughout the city. They can track you to gun shops. They can track you to political events if you're doing a gun rights rally. They could track you to all sorts of stuff. So I just don't know how anyone in our movement could be comfortable with these things in any way, shape, or form. And here's the other thing too, by the way, and maybe we'll write some stories about this, but people have been, the flock systems are not perfect. There's been people who have been misidentified, and the cops are just so certain that the cameras have picked them up and all this. And so there's been people charged with crimes or accused of crimes who later had to prove their own innocence to show that the flock systems were wrong. So that's the world we live in right now, guys. I hope that sheds some light on why gun owners, I think, need to be concerned. And if there's a fight against the flock systems in your community, I would highly recommend getting involved, because once this thing has a foothold, there's no turning back. And we are going to end up in a massive 1984 Orwellian surveillance state. And that should terrify everyone enough to want to get involved. Look, the ACLU is involved. There's leftists involved, and there's conservatives involved. That tells you both sides have very serious concerns about what these systems can do and why you should be very concerned about having them in your community. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this brief overview of the flock debate. Please be sure to check out some of the stories that we have on this. We'll put some of those in the description of this video. Thank you, and until next time, God bless.